Welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating and complex stories in the Bible, the rise and fall of the Moabites, the descendants of Lot and distant relatives of Israel. From their origins in the mountains after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, to their tumultuous relationship with the Israelites, and their ultimate downfall prophesied by the great prophets of the Bible. The Moabites are a powerful reminder of the consequences of pride, idolatry, and defiance against God. But there's more to this story than conflict and judgment. We'll also uncover the inspiring journey of Ruth, a Moabite woman whose faith and loyalty changed the course of history, becoming the great-grandmother of King David and part of the lineage of Jesus Christ himself. Did you know that God turned curses into blessings for Israel in their battles against Moab? Or that the Moabites' downfall was foretold long before they disappeared from history? And what lessons can we learn from their story today? Stay tuned as we reveal the incredible history of the Moabites, packed with battles, betrayal, redemption, and prophetic words that came true. You won't want to miss this. If you enjoy our deep dives into the hidden stories of the Bible, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Share your thoughts in the comments. What surprised you the most about the Moabites? And don't forget to share this video with your friends and family to support our mission of spreading biblical wisdom. Let's get started. The origins of the Moabites are deeply rooted in a story of survival, fear, and desperation. It all begins with Lot, a man closely associated with the patriarch Abraham. Lot chose to settle in the city of Sodom, a decision that would eventually lead to great turmoil. The story unfolds in Genesis chapter 19, where God decides to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah because of their extreme wickedness. Lot, however, finds favor with God due to Abraham's intercession, and he and his family are given a chance to escape the impending doom. As morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city." Genesis chapter 19, verse 15. After a dramatic escape, with Lot's wife tragically turning into a pillar of salt for looking back, Lot and his daughters fled to the mountains near Zoar. Here, they took refuge in a cave, isolated and fearful that humanity had been wiped out. Lot's daughters, believing that their family line would end, resorted to an extreme and disturbing plan. Then the firstborn said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there is no man on earth to come in to us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve offspring from our father." Genesis chapter 19, verses 31 to 32. In their desperation, Lot's daughters got their father drunk on 2 successive nights. They each lay with him, and both became pregnant. The firstborn daughter gave birth to a son named Moab, who became the ancestor of the Moabites, while the younger bore a son named Ben-Ami, the father of the Ammonites. Thus both the daughters of Lot were with child by their father. The firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. The younger also bore a son and called his name Ben-Ami. He is the father of the Ammonites to this day. Genesis chapter 19, verses 36 to 38. This troubling beginning set the stage for the Moabites' identity as a people born out of desperation and isolation. Despite their origins, the Moabites would go on to establish a significant presence east of the Dead Sea. Their relationship with the Israelites, marked by shared ancestry and conflicting destinies, began with these first crucial moments in the cave. The Moabites established themselves in a land situated east of the Dead Sea, known as the Plains of Moab. This region, characterized by its rocky hills, deep ravines, and rugged landscape, provided natural defenses and a strategic location for the Moabites. The main cities of Moab included Ar, Kir, and Dibon, which served as centers of power, trade, and culture. The fertile plains and access to vital trade routes allowed the Moabites to thrive economically, leveraging agriculture and commerce to build a strong and resilient nation. The land was not only rugged, but also well fortified, with cities often perched on high elevations that gave them a tactical advantage against potential invaders. Moab's strategic positioning allowed it to control significant trade routes, making it a valuable territory that was frequently contested by surrounding nations. And the Lord said to me, "Do not harass Moab, nor contend with them in battle, for I will not give you any of their land as a possession, because I have given Ar to the descendants of Lot as a possession." Deuteronomy, chapter 2, verse 9. God's instruction to the Israelites not to provoke the Moabites was a recognition of Moab's right to their land as descendants of Lot. The Israelites, during their wilderness journey, were specifically commanded to avoid conflict with the Moabites as they passed through the region. Despite this divine decree, the relationship between the two nations remained tense, marked by deep-seated mistrust and frequent hostilities. Moab's capital, Dibon, played a significant role in its history and was the site where the famous Mesha stele was discovered, a stone monument that provides an account of King Mesha of Moab's victories over Israel. This artifact, dating back to the 9th century BC, highlights the long-standing conflicts between Moab and Israel. Then Israel sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, saying, "Let me pass through your land. We will not turn aside into field or vineyard. We will not drink the water of a well. We will go by the king's highway until we have passed through your territory." But Sihon would not allow Israel to pass through his territory. Numbers, chapter 21, verses 21 to 23. Though this verse refers to the Amorites, it underscores the frequent territorial disputes and the importance of the King's Highway, a vital trade route that also passed near Moab. Control of such routes was crucial for Moab's economic strength and added to the ongoing friction with neighboring nations, including Israel. The land of Moab was not only a place of refuge and prosperity for its people, but also a source of pride and identity. Their fortified cities stood as symbols of Moabite resilience and determination. However, the Moabites' wealth and strategic position often made them targets of conquest, leading to a complex and fraught history with Israel. Now Israel settled in the plains of Moab, beyond the Jordan opposite Jericho. Numbers, chapter 22, verse 1. The Israelites camped in the plains of Moab during their final approach to the Promised Land, directly opposite Jericho. This proximity inevitably led to interactions, both peaceful and hostile, setting the stage for one of the most notable confrontations when Balak, king of Moab, sought to curse Israel through the prophet Balaam. The relationship between the Moabites and the Israelites was complex and often strained, marked by a mix of shared ancestry, conflicting interests, and divine intervention. Although the Moabites were distant relatives of the Israelites through their common ancestor Abraham, this kinship did little to prevent frequent tensions between the two nations. During the Israelites' journey to the Promised Land, God specifically instructed Moses and the Israelites not to provoke the Moabites or engage them in battle. Despite this, the Moabites viewed the growing strength of Israel as a significant threat, particularly after witnessing Israel's victories over powerful nations like the Amorites. But the Lord said to me, "Do not harass Moab or provoke them to war, for I will not give you any part of their land. I have given Ar to the descendants of Lot as a possession." Deuteronomy, chapter 2, verse 9. Even though Israel refrained from attacking Moab, the Moabites remained wary of the Israelites, and their fear would eventually lead them to take drastic and antagonistic actions. One of the most significant and dramatic episodes highlighting the fraught relationship between Moab and Israel occurred during the Israelites' encampment in the plains of Moab, just across the Jordan River from Jericho. Balak, the king of Moab, alarmed by the sheer number of Israelites and their recent conquests, sought to curse Israel. He called upon Balaam, a well-known prophet, hoping that a curse would weaken Israel and prevent them from becoming a further threat to Moab. Then the people of Israel set out and camped in the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan at Jericho. And Balak the son of Zippor saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites, and Moab was in great dread of the people, because they were many. Numbers, chapter 22, verses 1 to 3. Despite Balak's urgent pleas and offers of great reward, Balaam found himself unable to curse Israel as requested. Instead, each time he attempted to pronounce a curse, God intervened and turned his words into blessings, much to the frustration of Balak. But God said to Balaam, "You shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed." Numbers chapter 22, verse 12. Even when pressured to proceed, Balaam could only speak the words God placed in his mouth, leading to one of the most famous blessings over Israel. "How can I curse whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce whom the Lord has not denounced? God brought them out of Egypt. They have the strength of a wild ox." Numbers chapter 23, verses 8-22. This episode demonstrated God's unwavering protection over Israel, turning potential curses into declarations of Israel's strength and divine favor. Despite the Moabites' attempts to undermine Israel through spiritual warfare, God's hand remained over his people. However, the tension did not end with Balaam's failed curses. The Moabites and their Midianite allies sought to weaken Israel through more subtle means. They lured the Israelites into idolatry and immorality, inviting them to participate in pagan worship and leading them astray. This incident, known as the sin at Peor, brought severe consequences upon Israel. While Israel was staying in Shittim, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with Moabite women, who invited them to the sacrifices to their gods. The people ate the sacrificial meal and bowed down before these gods. Numbers chapter 25, verses 1-2. This act of deception led to God's anger against Israel, resulting in a devastating plague that claimed the lives of 24,000 Israelites. It was a stark reminder of the spiritual dangers posed by compromising alliances and the Moabites' ongoing enmity towards God's chosen people. Despite these hostilities, there were moments of peace and alliances between Israel and Moab. During the time of the Judges, there were periods of subjugation and cooperation. Although these were often short-lived and marred by betrayal, the Book of Ruth also provides a unique window into the more personal and redemptive aspects of this relationship, showing that individuals like Ruth could cross the cultural and religious divide, becoming part of God's greater plan for redemption. The Moabites were deeply entrenched in idolatrous practices that not only defined their culture, but also posed a spiritual danger to the Israelites. Central to Moabite worship was the god Chemosh, often referred to as the abomination of Moab. Chemosh was a deity associated with war, fertility, and sometimes even child sacrifice, practices that stood in stark contrast to the worship of the God of Israel. For Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not fully follow the Lord, as did his father David. Then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, on the hill that is east of Jerusalem. 1 Kings, chapter 11, verses 5-7. The Israelites were repeatedly warned by God to avoid intermingling with pagan nations and their practices, but the seductive allure of Moabite women and their worship rituals proved to be a significant stumbling block. One of the most notorious instances of this occurred at Shittim, where Israel's camp was near Moabite territory. Here, the Moabites and their Midianite allies employed a more subtle but devastating strategy against Israel. They used their women to entice the Israelite men into forbidden relationships and idolatry. While Israel was staying in Shittim, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with Moabite women, who invited them to the sacrifices to their gods. The people ate the sacrificial meal and bowed down before these gods. Numbers chapter 25, verses 1-2. This event, often referred to as the sin at Peor, involved not just sexual immorality, but also participation in pagan rituals that included eating food sacrificed to idols and bowing down to foreign gods. This act of rebellion against God's commandments was more than just a moral failing. It represented a direct affront to God's holiness and the covenant relationship he had established with Israel. So Israel yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor, and the Lord's anger burned against them. Numbers chapter 25, verse 3. God's response was swift and severe. a deadly plague swept through the Israelite camp, killing 24,000 people. This catastrophic judgment was only halted when Phinehas, the grandson of Aaron, took drastic action by killing an Israelite man and a Midianite woman who were openly defying God's law. Phinehas' zeal for God's honor stopped the plague, and he was commended for his righteous indignation. Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, has turned back my wrath from the people of Israel, in that he was jealous with my jealousy among them, so that I did not consume the people of Israel in my jealousy. Numbers, chapter 25, verse 11. The Moabites' idolatry was not limited to the incident at Peor. Their influence persisted throughout Israel's history, continually tempting the Israelites to stray from their covenant with God. The book of Judges records that Israel repeatedly fell into idolatry, often influenced by neighboring nations like Moab. These lapses into idol worship frequently led to cycles of oppression, where God allowed Israel to be subdued by their enemies as punishment for their unfaithfulness. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and served the Baals and the Ashtoreths, the gods of Aram, the gods of Sidon, the gods of Moab, the gods of the Ammonites, and the gods of the Philistines. They forsook the Lord and did not serve him. Judges, chapter 10, verse 6. Moab's legacy of idolatry left a lasting stain, not just on their own nation but also on the spiritual history of Israel. The repeated allure of Moabite customs and gods was a recurring challenge that tested Israel's faithfulness to Yahweh. These interactions highlight the dangers of compromising with pagan practices and the importance of adhering to God's commands. The Moabites' idolatry serves as a stark reminder of the spiritual pitfalls that arise when God's people turn away from his ways and embrace the practices of surrounding cultures. While the Moabites were known for their powerful cities and strategic land, their ultimate legacy in biblical history is one of spiritual corruption, a warning to all who would follow in their path of idolatry. While the Moabites were often portrayed as adversaries of Israel, the story of Ruth stands as a remarkable exception, an extraordinary tale of love, loyalty, and redemption. Ruth was a Moabite woman who became a key figure in the lineage of Israel's greatest king, David, and ultimately the Messiah, Jesus Christ. Her story, recorded in the book of Ruth, is a powerful testimony of how God's grace can transcend cultural and national boundaries. The story begins during the time of the Judges, when a severe famine forced Elimelech, his wife Naomi, and their 2 sons to leave Bethlehem and seek refuge in the land of Moab. While in Moab, Elimelech died, and his sons married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. After about 10 years, both of Naomi's sons also died, leaving Naomi and her daughters-in-law widowed and without support. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. They lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Ruth, chapter 1, verses 3 to 5. With no means of support and no future in Moab, Naomi decided to return to Bethlehem. She urged her daughters-in-law to remain in Moab and seek new husbands. But Ruth refused to leave her. Ruth's response to Naomi is one of the most profound declarations of loyalty in the Bible. But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you, for where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also if anything but death parts me from you." Ruth, chapter 1, verses 16 to 17. Ruth's decision to leave her homeland, her family, and her gods to embrace the people and the God of Israel was a courageous act of faith. She chose to follow Naomi back to Bethlehem, fully aware of the challenges she would face as a foreigner and a widow. Ruth's willingness to adopt the God of Israel as her own demonstrates the inclusivity of God's grace, reaching beyond the borders of Israel to draw people from all nations. Upon arriving in Bethlehem, Ruth sought to provide for Naomi by gleaning in the fields during the barley harvest. The practice of gleaning, commanded by God in the law of Moses, allowed the poor and the foreigner to gather leftover grain in the fields. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, neither shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. Leviticus chapter 23 verse 22. Ruth's hard work and humble spirit caught the attention of Boaz, a wealthy and kind landowner who was a relative of Elimelech. Boaz showed favor to Ruth, ensuring her safety and providing her with extra grain. Ruth's integrity and dedication to Naomi deeply impressed Boaz, setting the stage for a beautiful redemptive story. Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Ruth chapter 2 verses 11 to 12. Through a series of events guided by God's providence, Boaz, as the family's kinsman redeemer, took Ruth as his wife. This act not only redeemed Naomi's family line, but also integrated Ruth, a Moabite, into the covenant community of Israel. Their union produced a son named Obed, who would become the grandfather of King David. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And when he went into her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel." Ruth chapter 4 verses 13 to 14. Ruth's story is not just a tale of personal loyalty, it is a powerful example of how God's plan of redemption often works through unexpected people and circumstances. Despite her Moabite heritage, Ruth's faith and dedication allowed her to play a crucial role in God's unfolding plan for his people. She became the great-grandmother of David, Israel's greatest king, and an ancestor of Jesus Christ, the ultimate Redeemer. Now, let's further explore the downfall of Moab. Despite their significant role in the biblical narrative and their enduring enmity with Israel, the Moabites ultimately faced divine judgment for their pride, idolatry, and opposition to God's people. The downfall of Moab was foretold by several prophets, including Isaiah, Jeremiah, Amos, and Ezekiel, who warned that Moab's arrogance and idolatrous practices would lead to their destruction. The Moabites were known not only for their military might and strategic position, but also for their prideful spirit. This arrogance, combined with their ongoing idolatry, led them to believe that they were invincible, a belief that would prove to be their undoing. We have heard of the pride of Moab. He is very proud, of his loftiness, his pride, and his arrogance, and the haughtiness of his heart. Isaiah chapter 16 verse 6. Isaiah's prophecy highlights Moab's pride, describing it as their defining flaw. The Moabites' confidence in their fortified cities, wealth, and alliances blinded them to their vulnerability. They boasted in their strength and trusted in their idols, but they failed to recognize that their true battle was against the Lord. Isaiah prophesied that Moab would be brought low, their vineyards and fields, symbols of their prosperity, would be laid waste, and their joy would turn into mourning. Therefore my heart moans like a lyre for Moab, and my inmost self for Kir-Hareseth. And when Moab presents himself, when he wearies himself on the high place, when he comes to his sanctuary to pray, he will not prevail. Isaiah chapter 16 verses 11 to 12. Isaiah depicts a nation struggling and desperate, turning to their idols and high places for help, yet finding no answer. Their once proud and joyous celebrations would be replaced by sorrow, as God's judgment came upon them. Jeremiah, another major prophet, also pronounced severe judgments against Moab, emphasizing that their downfall was not merely a result of geopolitical shifts, but a direct consequence of their defiance against God. The Moabites had magnified themselves against the Lord, mocking his people and setting themselves up as enemies of his purposes. Moab shall be destroyed and be no longer a people, because he magnified himself against the Lord. Terror, pit, and snare are before you, O inhabitant of Moab. Jeremiah chapter 48 verses 42 to 43. Jeremiah's prophecy outlines the complete desolation of Moab. Their cities would be destroyed, their warriors defeated, and their land left desolate. The imagery of terror, pit, and snare illustrates the inescapable nature of God's judgment. No one would be able to escape the calamity that was coming upon them. The horn of Moab is cut off, and his arm is broken, declares the Lord. Jeremiah chapter 48 verse 25. The horn and arm symbolize strength and power, and their breaking represents the complete humiliation and weakening of Moab. Their military might, economic strength, and national pride would be shattered before the eyes of the nations. The prophet Amos also spoke against Moab, condemning them for their violent actions and highlighting the brutal nature of their conflicts with neighboring nations. Amos particularly called out Moab for their desecration of the king of Edom's bones, an act of extreme disrespect that demonstrated their deep-seated animosity. Thus says the Lord, "For 3 transgressions of Moab, and for 4, I will not revoke the punishment, because he burned to lime the bones of the king of Edom." Amos chapter 2 verse 1. This act of desecration exemplified the cruelty and arrogance that characterized Moab's interactions with other nations, further sealing their fate under God's judgment. Ezekiel also prophesied against Moab, aligning their fate with that of other nations who opposed God's people. Ezekiel's words echo the recurring theme of Moab's judgment as a result of their contempt for Israel and their misplaced confidence in their gods and fortified cities. Thus says the Lord God, because Moab and Seir said, "Behold, the house of Judah is like all the other nations. Therefore, I will lay open the flank of Moab, and I will give it along with the Ammonites to the people of the east as a possession." Ezekiel chapter 25 verses 8 to 10. Ezekiel's prophecy emphasizes that Moab's downfall was not just due to their pride, but also their disdain for Israel, viewing them as no different from any other nation despite Israel's unique covenant relationship with God. These prophecies of doom came to pass. Moab's cities were ravaged by invading forces, their people scattered, and their once proud nation was absorbed into other cultures. By the time of the New Testament, the Moabites had largely disappeared from historical records, their legacy preserved only in the pages of scripture and archaeological findings. The story of Moab's downfall is a sobering reminder of the consequences of pride, idolatry, and defiance against God. It serves as a powerful lesson that no nation, no matter how strong or secure it may seem, can stand against the judgment of the Lord. In the end, Moab's history is not just a story of a fallen nation, but a testament to the unwavering truth of God's word and the fulfillment of his prophetic declarations. In conclusion, the story of the Moabites is a complex tapestry of kinship, conflict, rebellion, and redemption. From their origins in the caves of Lot's exile to their ultimate destruction, the Moabites remind us of the consequences of pride and idolatry, but also of the power of God's grace through unlikely individuals like Ruth. As we reflect on the history of the sons of Moab, let us be reminded of the enduring mercy of God and his plans that transcend human failings. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on the Moabites and what stories you'd like us to explore next.